And I'm not giving up, I'm not giving up, no, not me. Even if nobody else believes, I'm not going down that easily. So don't give up on me.
Hey everyone, are you rad for Christ? You fired up for Jesus? Welcome back to Radical Christianity, the talk show that highlights God in action. I am Drew, your host, and I'm so glad you joined us today. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, prepare for a divine cinematic revelation. Martin Scorsese, the maestro behind classics like Goodfellas and The Wolf of Wall Street, is set to grace us with his heavenly take on Jesus. Can I get an amen? At 81, Scorsese is on a divine mission after a face-to-face with Pope Francis. Picture this, an 80-minute spiritual roller coaster focusing on Jesus' teachings, making it shorter than his recent epics. Talk about a cinematic sermon. Hallelujah! Now, I know what you're thinking. Religion? Hold your popcorn. But fear not, for Scorsese aims to untangle the spaghetti of organized religion and spotlight the true essence of Jesus' principles. Hey, why did the director want to make a movie about Jesus? Because he heard it would get divine reviews. Remember the epic films The Last Temptation of Christ and Gangs of New York? Those weren't just flicks, they were Scorsese's attempts to navigate the labyrinth of redemption, humanity, and the battle within ourselves. It's like trying to quietly find your car keys on the ground of a crowded church. Challenging, but enlightening. In a world where saying religion can spark a debate hotter than COVID vaccine controversies, Scorsese is encouraging us to hit the pause button. Don't dismiss it offhand, he says. It's like reconsidering your decision to skip dessert. You might miss out on something sweet. Okay, so why would Jesus make a great actor in a film? Because he will always nail his lines. Scorsese is re-entering the Christian film canon alongside films like Jesus of Nazareth and The Robe. And he's here to prove that even Hollywood legends can join the Heavenly League. Maybe someday we'll be calling it Holywood. No? Well, one can hope. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, or should I say the crucifixion on set. Remember The Last Temptation of Christ? Well, that film stirred more controversy than a debate on pineapple pizza. It portrayed Jesus with human struggles and even, dare I say, desires. People are clutching their popcorn and crossing their fingers that this one won't stir up as much controversy. We want popcorn, not pitchforks. So, my fellow believers and film enthusiasts, let's welcome Scorsese's venture with open arms and sprinkle a little holy water. This movie might just be the passion of the director, a cinematic resurrection that leaves us pondering life's deeper questions. Can I get an amen and a drum roll for what might be the greatest Scorsesian parable yet? All right, enough film talk. Tell me, are you rad for Christ? You fired up for Jesus? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a great guest for you coming up right now. This is a wonderful, wonderful day. For those of you who aren't familiar, this church has a major impact in our community. So, from Cornerstone Church, let's have a huge, warm welcome for Nate Franklin. Woo! Nate, welcome to Radical Christianity. Please have a seat. Nate, welcome to Radical Christianity.
What's up, Drew? Glad to be here.
Man, it is cool to have you here. We've been trying to get somebody from Cornerstone for a few weeks, man, you know what I mean? And then, you know, as much as we love to have you here, you know, your father had laryngitis today.
Yes, you know, I'll gladly stand in for him, and hopefully I can hold the bar as high as he would. But
you know what? This is how I view it, right? So he had a medical condition come down, right? Where as much as I don't want him to suffer, is probably, you know, the way God intended all this to work out.
Hey, yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, you are sitting here, I am sitting here, we're talking. How can we say that's not God's will?
True. Very true.
Yeah, so the way we normally do things here is testimony to ministry. So please tell us how you met Jesus.
Well, I like to start off by saying, like, I had a drug problem growing up. What I mean by that is I was a church kid. I was drugged to church every Sunday, every Wednesday. I don't have the same story that most people have,
Just so you know,
but it was still a problem.
Just so you know, that joke has been heard.
Serious? Yes. That makes sense, because there's some of us that have had that problem. And so that's where my story starts. I start not like most of culture now, where church isn't, a child being raised in church isn't the common norm. Right. I had that, but that doesn't mean that I was engaged in all of it. I didn't hate God or hate church, but I didn't want to engage with it. I was an athlete growing up. I had some good prospects to be in the sports that I played. And so I spent all of my energy and time doing that, which is not really any different than most of us. We spend our time focused on the gifts or the good things that we think come from our life. And so I spent my growing years doing that, coming to church, but spending my focus on how can I build myself or build what was there. And it really came down to, I went to visit my sister one time when I was 17 years old. Okay. She was living in Phoenix, Arizona. I tell people this, I was a kid that had an anger problem for no reason. There's a lot of people that go through trauma in life that have, I don't want to say a justified reason, but they have reasons for their anger, their frustration. I grew up in a good home with good parents. I didn't want for things in my life. God had taken care of me. I just didn't have the insight to understand that in my goodness, there was no reason why, in God's goodness, there was no reason why I should be angry. But I was angry for no reason. The older I get, I realize, man, that is just the reality of life, is that until we meet Jesus and find hope, there are things that center into our hearts outside of him. And so I, like many people, dealt with anger. And I was a 17-year-old, angry at the world for no good reason. And I was ready to go spend spring break with whoever of my friends. And my parents, as good as they were like, you ain't going anywhere. There's nowhere that you're headed. And then my sister told them that, hey, he can come visit me. I said, well, anywhere but Fresno, I'm good. I'll go get myself into some trouble. And I didn't find myself in some trouble. I actually found myself spring break, my senior year, making decisions for college, where to play sports, and what I was doing in the back of a pew in Phoenix, Arizona, while my sister was volunteering at some church, and the Lord got a hold of me. I was sitting in the back, didn't want to do anything. I was just there because I was spending time with my sister. I had a black hoodie on. I could remember the moment. I wasn't even sitting on the end of the pew. I was sitting in the middle of the pew trying to just hide, probably with my headphones on because I didn't go anywhere without my headphones. I thought I was that guy. And I remember, and it brings me chills right now. Like, I was sitting in that building, as large as that building was, with nobody around me, feeling so alone, feeling so frustrated with life, having all of these questions of like, what's next and where am I going to go? And I felt the still small voices the Bible talks about come to me and say, son, are you done yet? And I didn't hear an audible voice. It wasn't like, oh, like these movies. But it was in my heart that God was like, hey, I've got something different for you than what you're running towards. And he said, look, if you would just let me, I'll lead your life. And I remember in that moment feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders, as much as the weight of the world could be on a 17-year-old, but feeling it in that moment. And in that same sitting, feeling it all go away and go, all right, God, I'll trust you. And it was from that point that the trajectory of my life, from being like all about sports and all about this, to like, no, I gotta figure out who God is for me. And I went back home. I said I wasn't going to go to certain colleges that I was opting into and all of that. And I actually told my parents, I need to go back to Phoenix, Arizona. I ended up moving to Phoenix, Arizona for 2 years because the Bible talks about these moments in the Old Testament where men and women, they had with God, and God said, mark this. Mark this space. They called it Bethel, like places where God showed up. Right. Well, Phoenix, Arizona was that for me.
Yeah, there's a lot of, they probably don't exist now, but in the Old Testament, there's a whole lot of altars that were built to mark moments that had happened. Yeah. And
so for me, that was it. And I said, I got to get back to, if God was there, I got to go right there because he's showing me about myself. And I spent 2 years chasing the Lord. I've been chasing the Lord since, but
Was he running from you?
No, he wasn't. He wasn't. But the Bible says that he likes to play hide and go seek, and he's not good at it. Jeremiah 33 says, "Call upon me," or "Search after me, find me, and I'll be found of you." But you got to look for me. He's like, I'm not hiding, but I want to know that you're willing to look for me. And so I went to look for him, and man, he's changed my life ever since. And I can tell you all these things that have happened since then. But that was the marking of my life to know, no, God had something for my life. And regardless of how I grew up and how other people grow up, God is chasing after you to remind you that you're loved, that you're called, that he's got a purpose for you, and that pain that you're carrying, he can uplift.
So, for the people that are watching, how would you define the anger that you were experiencing at 17? Was it just like, you felt like you were trapped, like you felt like you were forced into some kind of lifestyle? Where do you think that anger came from? Because obviously, you had loving parents.
For sure.
You had a good, strong family. So what do you think the anger came from?
I think it stems two ways. Number one, I think my immaturity, my lack of capacity to handle the frustrations of my life, the doubts of my life, the questions of my life. I didn't have the tools within myself, nor was I actually looking to get tools. So I had this pent up, kind of like when you shake a soda and you shake it up, you've got all of this built up pressure inside. I had built up pressure and I didn't know, no one ever taught me how to process, or I didn't receive the things that good people had tried to teach. My parents had tried to teach me how to process. The other thing I'll say is environment matters. It does matter. So I had a holy environment or a good environment, but I also spent a lot of times with people that weren't good for me. My mom would tell me growing up, bad company corrupts good morals. Not that you can't ever spend time with people that are different from you, but you become like those. They see this in leadership. You become like those, like the average of the 5 people that are closest to you. Well, the 5 people that were closest to me were doing things that I would never list out online or out in the open of what they should be doing. And I thought that, I'm going to be good. I won't become like them. And I actually started to bear the same weight that they were carrying, started to think like them. I started to talk like them. And it was in those two things, not having the maturity to handle the situations of my life, processing in a healthy way, and the environment that I allowed to seep into me, that I started to become like the environment. And that made me angry. And I'm going to talk about what I put in my life and all of that, but those two things I really think play a bigger part in our life than we realize.
Yeah. Well, no, I think that's really great that you shared that. A lot of people, struggle with bad home life. And so when they, see somebody who didn't have a bad home life that also suffers, and they realize that they got nothing to blame, what I mean? Which is a beautiful way to look at things when you want to address it. Which means that Jesus is there for you, man. Yep. Just get into it. So, all right. So, Cornerstone Church, for those who don't know, it's downtown Fresno, in the old Wilson
We
Theater.
don't use the word old. It's the historic Wilson Theater. The oldest existing operating theater in Fresno County. So we love it.
It wasn't a church when I graduated high school. In fact, I went and this is going to age me. I went and saw Cinderella there.
Wow.
And I've seen like the lynch mob there, and like all kinds of like massive concerts there, like right after high school. So that's a nice theater. You know what I mean? It's a so you guys must feel pretty blessed to have something that's like so rich in history and so beautiful in design.
Yeah, we love it. We think it's an answer to prayers. We were at a point to where we had a space, a church, even down the street from where we are now in the studios, and God was doing some amazing things, and we grew out of it. Well, the operator of the Wilson, about 1996, happened to walk pastor, who happens to be my dad, into the theater when we were looking for buildings. And it was in that moment that he walked into the theater to rent it for a time or two. I think it was actually for an Easter service. And he walked in there, and when the guy turned the lights on, it was as if it was like, nope, this is where you need to be. And he told God in all of his theater, and you can hear about pastor's background. My parents have a theater background. And he said, if you allow us to steward this, we'll use it in any way, shape for the gospel and the kingdom. And so we've done it. We kept it as a theater. We do productions all the time, but we love it. We think it's a rich part of our history in Fresno County, and we want to keep it that way. Now it's in the hands of the Lord, and so we get to do some great things with it.
So what kind of do you guys do events there outside of the normal church
Yeah,
thing,
so
or?
normal church is on Sunday, but our staff would tell you we're doing something every day of the week. Not just from outreach perspectives, but like we just did a free movie for families on last Sunday night, or 2 Sundays nights ago. We're doing a movie in March every third Sunday night of the month. We do a free movie for families, faith-based or positive film in there, because it used to be a theater.
So no dirty dancing, is what you're
No
saying.
dirty dancing. We're not doing dirty dancing in there. And then whether it's Easter production or a fall production or Christmas production, we're on our 3rd year of Scrooge, the Gospel According to Scrooge, for Christmas at the end of the year. So those are some of the events that we do inside of there. I know coming up, we've got a big worship night that's happening, a free worship night on March 10th.
Wait, free worship night? Does it mean you guys charge for worship?
No, but it's some people ask, like, hey, the events that you do, because they're so high quality, do you charge for them? And not necessarily as a church, but everything else. So I want to make that mention that hey, it's a free night of worship. We'll come in, we're bringing guys from outside of the city that have traveled all over, and we're just expecting God to do something great that night.
Cool. That's cool. So, do you guys ever do any like actual stage theater performances there? Do you do any? You know, what I mean, it's like you have that facility, and
Of
I'm
course.
so curious. Like what is the?
So at least twice a year we do stage performances.
Okay.
We use the full fly gallery. We use lighting. We use actors. Our last play had 87 actors and actresses in it. So it's full cast. Takes months to prepare for it. We love it.
Yeah. And what kind of do you do it like for a long period of time, or just was it a one night thing, or?
So the Gospel According to Scrooge, which was the last one during Christmas, we did 5 performances in over a 2-week span.
Okay. That's not bad. I mean,
No.
It's 5 performances. That's like basically a week's worth. I mean, so that's what you might get from like a high school or something like that. So
No, it's a good amount of performances, and usually hundreds of people will come every night.
that's cool. So like a packed house, or yeah.
Yeah, it'll be close on some of the nights. It'll be a packed house, and then other nights it'll just be a half house or.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And no crickets, though, I hope.
No crickets. No. Productions are great.
That's cool. So that's awesome that you're getting use out of that facility. That facility is nice. I mean, it's like if you have not seen, just take an opportunity to go to Cornerstone on a Sunday or during one of their events and sit there, because it will just sitting there before anything starts will be an experience. And I'm sure with the way that you guys are kicking the gospel around in that building, God's presence will be felt just sitting in the room. So, all right. So, what kind of things you guys got coming on? What's the next big stuff going on?
So our next big is we've got it's called the Living Room Worship Night, March 10th. We've got another movie night, March 24th. And then Easter. Easter's right around the corner. Everybody's gearing up for Easter. So that's the end. It's early this year, end of March.
Yeah.
So we're gearing up for that.
It's like the Super Bowl for Christians, you know what I mean?
It's an important day for us. It is
Yeah.
to celebrate and acknowledge, as much as we draw it in culturally one way or the other. It is the day that we celebrate what we've got given to us because of what Christ has done.
Well, I mean, it's a pretty heavy day it's always amazed me how light society does Easter, right? I mean, the whole Easter bunny thing and the kids getting, they're more worried about candy and, whatever toy, you know what I mean? But it's like the message of Easter, I mean, it's so much more impacting than even the message of Christmas. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's not only is we've identified at that point on this planet that Jesus is the Messiah, and he's dead, but he rises from the dead. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the only other historical risings from the dead I'm aware of are ones that Jesus was responsible for. So, it's just like one of those things that is pretty important, is pretty impactful. So, what are you guys doing for Easter? What's your plan this year?
We're just we've got communion that happens every morning, Sunday morning on Easter, every Easter Sunday morning, where we gather together and celebrate the death, the burial, and the resurrection. So that's communion. And then we just have services, but they're not basic services. I don't ever want to use that word when we're worshiping the Lord. There are services. We're not doing anything extra. We're not having all this candy handed out. There's nothing wrong with that, but we're having Easter and we're inviting people. You know, the reality of statistics will tell you that people, if you ask people, 80% of people that don't go to church, those of you that might be watching, if somebody asked you, a friend that was closest to you, statistics say close to 80% of people would say yes to come. So, hey, I'm going to go to church. And so we're just taking that opportunity this year to go, how do we push people to ask their friends to just come to service with them and see what God has done, see the story. Because the reality is most of culture only knows the Easter Bunny now and they don't know Jesus.
Yeah.
Because we've been so inundated with falsehood and lies and deception, and we can talk that through for hours. The reality is people don't grow up in Christian homes like we thought they did, or they don't have a Christian knowledge like we think that they should. And so Easter to them is the Easter Bunny. But when we bring them to an environment that celebrates Jesus, you said it a second ago, the power of God shows up and they go, oh, wait, there's something more to this.
Oh, yeah.
And that's our hope.
That's the key right there, the something more. And obviously the enemy is taking over modern media, which is,
of course,
I don't know if you looked at the brochure I handed you the other day, but what my whole ministry is about is about flipping that script.
Yeah.
One of the things that I remember from my childhood, it was even from before my childhood, and that is, Charles Schultz, does the Peanuts, right? The whole Easter Peanuts thing, and then the Christmas Peanuts thing, they both stop to talk about the actual message, especially the Christmas one. The Easter one, I don't even see that one on TV anymore. I think it was just too heavy. You know what I mean? But the Christmas one, it still stops and says, hey, this is what Christmas is actually about, it's like, one of the things that irritates me about a lot of the Jesus movies, like The Greatest Story Ever Told and that kind of stuff, is like they don't put much emphasis on the risen Jesus. They all talk about the story, they'll talk about the miracles, they'll talk about the big thing, but then like, hey, Jesus is alive. It's like, I don't want to go down too many rabbit holes because I have a million of them, and it's nice to talk to to somebody on these topics. But there is like archaeological evidence that they had scrapings of Jesus's blood that that was seeped through, to the lower chamber, that kind of thing, and then they, his blood was tested and they thought it was a gag because there was only 24 chromosomes, 23 from Mary and 1 from the Creator. And the blood was still alive 2,000 years later. I don't have the evidence to check on that and verify it personally, but I mean, we're talking about, nobody disputes that. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it's like one of those things where, like, even when we have science to back up miracles and God as a real thing, we still get a bunch of,
But that's the reality of humanity, though. We can have as much evidence as we want in front of us, and we're not going to believe it until we, like Thomas, put our fingers in in the holes in his wrists or in his hands, or us like me, in my own life. I grew up in a Christian household, heard it, had been inundated with it. I'll even use that word, that it's always around me. But until I had an experience with him, and that's what Jesus wants to do for us. For those that are watching, you, me, he constantly wants to invade our space to go, I know all the evidence and you want to believe the lies, so let me do an experience in your life that supersedes all that you've been feeling or thinking, because that's what happens. Jesus brings truth and the lies can't stand. What does James say? Is that when light shows up, darkness can't survive.
Right. So, Jesus even defines him it was defined as the truth in the Bible.
100%.
You know what I mean? And I mean, it's like what do what is that truth? And the truth is pretty simple. I mean, it is that there is a real God, and he really loves us.
For sure.
And he wants us to have a relationship with him. And, I mean, again, we could go on a whole lot of different directions, but I mean, the everything in the Bible points to Jesus.
Yes, it does.
I to this day, I'm still amazed with Torah scholars, people who know the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, like it's back of their hand. I grew up with a lot of them. You know what I mean? And I sit down with them and I'm like, okay, so you're familiar with all this stuff, right? I'm like, okay, well, what do you think the Son of Man is? And what do you think? It's like, what kind of evidence did you need? And it's like you could say, well, we expect this big warrior, and I'm like, okay, well, what did Isaiah say? He didn't really claim Jesus was going to be a warrior, or the Messiah was going to be a warrior. So I trip out on humanity's need to avoid God.
Of course. But we've been doing that since Genesis. Make a mistake and Adam runs.
Yeah. I know. Why are we going to be idiots,
We do. But yet the Father chases us.
Yeah. That's the beauty of it right there, is that no matter what, our Father loves us.
Of course.
And he wants us to come home because we're a bunch of prodigal kids.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. So, yeah. So you got some cool events going on. You got some you got a great story, a great theater. Your dad's a pretty powerful speaker.
Yes, he is.
It makes me laugh when I go to Clovis Hills. So when your dad and our pastor get together, it's a tickle because we got we got completely different, what would you call it? Denominational,
of course,
approaches, but it's all the same merged gospel. And I love it because I grew up with my grandparents being Assembly of God, my mother being Assembly of God, and my father being a Southern Baptist reverend.
That is your two worlds right there. There
exactly.
You
go. So I love to see it because I'm like, I'm at home.
Of course.
So yeah, it's like one of those things where you can be charismatic and still be boring at the same time. No, no offense, Sean. I hope you're not watching. You're not boring, bud. He knows he's not boring. He's actually pretty funny.
He is. He is.
I just don't see him get up and dance or do anything crazy. You know what I mean? It's like I just don't see that happening.
He'll rock out.
He'll rock out. That's for sure.
For sure.
In fact, that's one of the things he and I have in common is that we're both former road musicians.
Oh wow!
So yeah, we've both been on tour. In fact, we were on tour probably at the same time. So it's kind of like one of those things. Yeah, we're the same age too. So it's yeah. It's like I'm not gonna tell everybody how old you are, Sean. Don't worry. No, so obviously, growing up with your dad has probably been its own unique experience.
Of course.
I'm not going to ask for any secrets that I could throw at him later.
You won't get them. I'm too loyal.
Good. He's gonna give you points for that one. No. What do you think that your dad and you and the other people that run your church bring to the table that makes Cornerstone so impactful?
That's a hard question. I know
that's why I asked it.
I think we all realize, one, that we're all individually in need of Jesus. And so we all have a story. I know that sounds really blanket, but when we get into ministry, sometimes we can forget that we have a story too, that Jesus has changed our life. And then we have a responsibility. We carry a responsibility to be a part of somebody else's story. Pastor says it all the time, that our job is to bring our city back to God. And our city is made up of someone's son, someone's daughter, someone's mother, someone's father. So we're constantly looking for, hey, whose sister or whose brother, whose mother, whose father is hurting and is in need of hope, need to find Jesus. We heard a great story this morning of somebody that didn't feel welcomed in other places, not to bash or anything, but they had a hard upbringing and they walked into Cornerstone, and because they felt loved at Cornerstone, they then were able to open themselves up and receive what God had already sent for them. They started following Jesus, and shortly after they had passed away because of a sickness, they started following Jesus. Their life had changed before in that season, before they knew their time was up, and it's because we all have been loved. Those who have been loved much carry a bunch of love. And so that's who we are. We're nobody special. We're just a bunch of people that want to serve people. My dad loves You're in a Rocker. You'll appreciate it. Dad loves Bob Dylan. So sometimes we'll get to singing that we need to serve somebody. And I know that talks about serving the devil or serving the Lord, but we use that sometimes to go, man, it's our job to serve somebody.
Yeah.
Who are we going to cross today that we're going to serve?
Yeah, one thing when people try to, like my grandmother used to, because she was hardcore Assembly of God, used to say that, rock and roll was the devil's music, And I'd be like, oh, rock and roll is music.
Yeah.
God gave these people gifts and gave them talents. There's nothing that's put out there that isn't from God. You know what I mean? Because He makes all of us. He gives us all everything. So everything that comes out is from God, right? It's just how it's used after the fact. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are things out there that are, not glorifying to God, right? But God can still use them for His glory.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It blows my mind how people will try to put God in a box.
Of course.
You know what I mean? But it's like, God knew that everything that was going to go wrong, every sin that was going to happen, He knew about it when you were in your mother's womb.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yet He still decided to make you the way He made you. You know what I mean? That's just, And then it's like, how many people have an impactful testimony? How many people are able to bring God to you know what I mean? Because of the heavy sin that was in their life that God brought them through. You know what I mean? It's like I see sin as part of God's design. You know what I mean? It's whether or not that's a comfortable thing for people to talk about. You know what I mean? Because I'm not trying to give you an excuse to sin. Don't read me wrong on that. I just see like everything that happened and everything that's going to happen is God saw it from the beginning. Yeah. And it's kind of like, okay, for you Marvel fans, okay, I don't know if you watched Endgame.
I have.
Okay, so that Doctor Strange went through all the variations, and when I saw that, I was all like, that is a great analogy for how God sees everything. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, He might let something terribly horrible happen, but the end result is the best outcome.
Yeah, God definitely had foreknowledge of what was going on, whether it was desired by Him, whether He let us have our free will and His desire, totally two different things. But God definitely saw it, and yet still in His foreknowledge loved us, sent His Son for us to correct us, to connect with us, and so.
Yeah, I like to try to throw those challenging things out there.
Hey.
So. All right, we are out of time, but thank you so much for coming on the show. It's such great to have you here. I can't wait to reconnect with you. I mean, technically, we met today, technically this morning, but you seem like a great dude. You seem like you got your heart in the right place for Jesus. And what we like to say on this show is you're definitely rad for Christ. You're definitely fired up for Jesus,
receive it.
And we love to see that here.
Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity.
Yeah. Housekeeping time. Yes, housekeeping time is the time you guys get to sit here and watch me awkwardly tell you that we operate off of donations here on Radical Christianity. We would love it if you felt the need to partner with God and help us with this show. How can you help, you ask? Well, it's really easy. If you have $5, $10, $15, $20, $100, whatever it is that God puts it on your heart to share, it would be amazing if you would help us with those funds so that we can produce a high-quality show for you for a long period of time. It is really easy to do. You just go to our website, radforchrist.com, and you click on the donate link up at the top. And that will take you to the Mr. E Christian Media donation page. Now, Mr. E Christian Media is the umbrella company that is the nonprofit that we do this show through. And basically, it is a 501c3 nonprofit charity, which means that your donation is fully tax deductible. And you just go to the website, click the donate link, And then you can drop down from the drop-down list, Radical Christianity as a selection, and then all the funds that you put in that dollar value will come to this show for production purposes. And you can put whatever value you want in there. Hopefully God is putting it on your heart what you need to put to us, and we would be very grateful, and it would be a blessing to you and a blessing to us. So, also, if you don't have any money to spare but you would like to help, there's a lot of things that you can still do. You can share us on social media, you can email a friend, you can make a family member sit down and watch the show with you, you can tell people at work about it, you can talk to your pastor and say, hey, watch this show, check out this show. You can write us, recommend some guests. There's a lot of ways you can help. But another way that's really important is you can pray for the show. You can pray that we will get the funds that we need to make sure that we keep operating, that we'll have plenty of volunteers, plenty of staff people, that our health and our ideas and everything that we're doing on this show continues to be fully glorifying to God and stays within God's will. That would be a wonderful help for us. So, with all that said, I want to thank you for joining us again, and on with the show. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm super excited for you to meet our next guest. He is a great man with some great things to say. Let's have a huge warm welcome for the supervisor of Madera County, David Rogers. Woo! Hey, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good, please have a seat. Cool. David, welcome to Radical Christianity.
I'm glad to be here.
Oh man, this is cool. So Madera County Supervisor. Now, Madera County is pretty big. A lot of people don't realize where that reaches. I mean, that's up in Yosemite, right?
Right. It goes all the way up into the mountains and all of the valley with some of the richest farmland in the world right there in Madera County.
Yeah. So do you have to deal with some really uptight, wealthy farmers because of that?
Oh yeah, continuously.
Continuously.
Yeah, I get regular phone calls about roads and various other things. Water's
probably a big one.
The big issue, yes.
Yeah.
It's the biggest issue we'll face in this century.
Yeah. So, what do you think about all the rain we've been getting? I mean, are we saving
fantastic.
Are we saving that water, or are we just letting it run off?
No, actually, we are saving that water. Last year, Chowchilla Water District recharged on its own 140,000 acre feet. And that, to give you perspective on that, that's an acre. That would be an acre of water under a foot of water.
Okay.
An acre covered with a foot of water.
All right.
So 140,000 acre feet is 140,000 acres of 1 foot of water.
Well, so that will be very beneficial to the farmers.
Absolutely.
As long as we don't exploit the water.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I don't want to get too into the business side, because we're here to talk about Jesus, but
sure.
I'm curious because Madera is when I drive through there, it's not the greenest territory for the most part, but then the green kind of goes up the hill a little bit.
Right.
So
it's this water is so great for our valley, and I just relish more and more rain. You know, the more we can get, the better. It just goes into the ground and recharges our aquifer, which is what our aim is right now. So
yeah. What about the snowpack? You got a lot of snowpack in your district too, right?
Yeah, the snowpack last year was 3 million acre feet, and all that melted, of course, and started coming down and created some flooding. But by and large, we were able to handle it. We were ready for it, and a lot of that water went right into the ground. So it was very beneficial. And one of the big problems is the state doesn't see the value of farmland like they should, and they value putting the water out through to the ocean and value fish over people, which is a sad state of affairs.
Do you think that it's the state in general, or do you think that it is the political mindset of the power of the state for the recent history?
I think you're onto something there, because I believe that what we're experiencing now is a result of abandoning God all along. Even this issue, when we talk about the worshiping the creature over the creator,
Right.
and valuing fish over people. This is all a symptom of the bigger problem. And we know even in Jesus' day, he said the spirit of Antichrist was already present in that time. Well, we're seeing the spirit of Antichrist manifest in the lack of common sense thinking of people, where they don't think like you and I would think as Christians, because our mind is renewed every day by the Word of God. Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is acceptable, good and acceptable unto God. So people that don't have their mind renewed are going to think completely different than we do. I mean, it's going to be a foreign way of thinking. As an example, the spirit of Antichrist, we know, is working right now all over the world. And we see him working really hard in the Middle East against Israel, who are God's chosen people. And in Revelation, it says that at some point, the spirit of Antichrist is going to go fight against the woman who brought forth the child. And there's only one person that could be talking about, and that's Jesus. Right. The woman that travailed to bring forth the child. And the reason that Israel is being attacked today is because the world hates God, and they hate God's people. And they hate God's people because they hate Jesus. And Jesus was born of those people, so therefore that's their logic to attack.
See, I think it goes a little deeper than that, because I actually, so on this show, we try not to go too far with because it's really easy to poke fun at some absurdity. Sure. And we intro every episode with a monologue, and we try to poke fun at absurdity. And sometimes it seems like we're a little, anti, people, right? But we're not. No. We're not at all. But we are anti some concepts. Like, we don't necessarily think it's okay to sexualize children. Right. You know what I mean? Like, and so like when something comes up that's in the news that talks about children being sexualized, I tend to try to highlight that and point out the absurdity at it. And I try to use humor and lightheartedness to hit an important topic. But some people will say that see that as like I'm trying to be negative towards a community. And I'm not. But, you can't expect people to do that. But one of the things that I have a lot of friends, not like close friends, I mean, some of them are close, but for the most part, I have a lot of friends that are, in those communities. You know what I mean? I've been around too long to not make that kind of, those amount of friends. And anybody who knows me knows, you know what I mean? But some of the things that I see is that it's not just... It doesn't start with that they don't like God or they're trying to avoid God. Right. It's actually more like they don't like themselves. Mm-hmm. They don't like how they were made or who they were made, into. Right. And it's because of whatever the challenges are or what they didn't get. And instead of embracing what they actually were given, right, they're trying to reset the mark. Mm-hmm. And because... And this is the thing that bugs me the most. And because they can't really be something they're not, they want other people to say that they are, so that they can basically, almost like, like some people will talk about in marketing. If you lie about something enough times, people will start to believe it.
That's Nietzschean philosophy. Right. Exactly. And we see a rise of a lot of this in our world. Mm-hmm. Men who aren't women want to be women, and they want us to say that they're women, and we want us to accept that they're a woman when the biology is completely against it. And of course, God is the God of creation. He created us a certain way, right? And He loves people. He hates sin, but He loves people. And the world is so full of sin because our minds are just corrupted by all of the thinking of the world, and we start thinking like that, and we're going to get confused. Confusion reigns supreme today because of relative morals, because of relative thinking. God has He has a specific set of morals. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Don't commit adultery. Don't lie against your neighbor. Those are specific, very direct constructs from His Word. And when we talk about the 10 Commandments, the first set of 6 deal in our relationship with people. Second set of 6 talk about, or second set of 4 talk about our relationship with God. So I may have reversed that.
Yeah, the first one's I think a relationship with God.
The first one's a relationship with God, but God and people. That's what life's about.
Right.
And when we take God out of the equation, we mess everything up. I think it was George Washington who said, "It is impossible to rightly govern the world without God and the Bible."
You know, it's like one of these things that's kind of a reoccurring theme. And I think the reason why a lot of like atheists and, people who are, hard on the trans agenda and that kind of stuff, the reason why they are so anti-God is because God represents truth. And they don't want the truth.
Right.
You know what I mean? Almost like a little bit of, Jack Nicholson. You can't handle the truth.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Right.
But
Right.
it's like one of those things that it's like I feel for them.
I do too.
You know what I mean? And I and in some cases, I understand why they feel that way. But I'm also very sympathetic because I want to tell them, and I want them to understand that if they choose God's way over this way, they are going to be more happy. Exactly. They're going to find that peace and that love and that joy that they're actually looking for.
Right.
But they don't believe that.
Right.
They don't believe that God's going to give them that because maybe some of them might have pursued God at one point and they didn't find what they were looking for. And, some, you know what I mean? And it's just for whatever, there's a spectrum of stories there.
It's the same reason a thief doesn't want to find a police officer, because the reality of God tells me I'm a sinner. I commit sin. I have wronged God. And I found that out at an early age. I realized, even as a Christian, I sin daily. I can't even conduct myself in this world properly because of my nature, because of who I am. My father was Adam. Your father was Adam. We all have. The first scripture I had my boys memorize was Romans 3:23. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Yeah. And that's the first thing I realized when I turned to God and repented of my sins and asked Him to be my Savior.
So speaking of that, great segue, tell us, how did that happen? Tell us your testimony. How did you meet Jesus?
Well, I was raised in church in a Christian family, and that has some advantages, but some disadvantages too. I saw a lot of the hypocrisy, a lot of the fear that shouldn't have been there in a Christian life. And, my parents weren't perfect, but I had a lot of wonderful people around me who lived out their faith in front of me. And at some point, I wanted what they had. And when I realized that, the day I realized, I think it was to the day, the moment I realized, man, I am a sinner. I don't have any protection from that, and I need some help. And I immediately just surrendered to Christ at that point. And so I think the great benefit of being disciplined and being brought up in a Christian home and taught the gospel your whole life is that instant recognition that when the scripture says, it talks about sin reviving. When sin revived, I died. The age of accountability when I came to realize I was a sinner, and so that came swiftly for me.
Right.
And I became really involved in the church. I was from an early age. I was involved in the youth. I was a youth president for many years, and then I surrendered to minister in my life. At the age of about 15 and a half. And I used to travel the state and speak at various churches two young people about their lives. And at one point, a church called me to be their senior pastor in Orange County, California. And I was senior pastor there about 9 years. And then I went to Texas for a little while, and I went to Arkansas for a little while, came back to California, and I've been involved in worship leadership for about 40 years, 50 years. And pianist, I play piano, and I've been involved in worship music and leading worship music, and actually doing concerts for a long, long time, all over the country.
That's nice.
Yeah, with my family, we did that a lot, and that was wonderful time.
All Partridge Family style?
Very much so, very much so. My brother played the bass guitar. I played the piano. We sang. We had 4-part harmony. I've been doing that since I was about 3.
That's awesome. That's great.
So 54 years of playing the piano. And I still play it every Sunday because the Spirit of God works through our talents, right? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we wouldn't have talents. He gave us those talents. And there's a lot of times when I've really experienced just turning loose and letting the Spirit of God guide my fingers and guide my heart. And I'll be like, what did I do there? What did I do there? I like that. What did I do there? Because it's almost like I'm not in full control. I am and I'm not. You know what I mean? So it's a great experience to worship God in that way. And I've always felt that we ought to use our talents for Christ.
I definitely am in the mode of that. Yeah. I mean, my whole ministry, actually, the mission statement of my ministry is to enable creatives to use their talents for the glory of God. Awesome. That's literally my ministry's statement. So,
I've got 3 sons.
Oh yeah.
And all 3 of my sons play multiple instruments. And 2 of them are worship leaders and pastors at local churches. One in Madera, one in Chowchilla.
Nice.
And the other is a police officer sergeant in Idaho. And
he's a rebel.
He's a rebel, SWAT commander. He's a minister who carries the sword, right? Mm-hmm. As the scripture said. But I couldn't ask for better sons, and I'm grateful that their talents are turned toward that as well. I play every Sunday with my youngest son, and I asked him the other day. I said, "How many years have we been playing together now?" And he said, 22. So 22 for him with me, and they were pretty young when I brought them up on stage, and they always make light of that because they didn't have a choice. They knew they had to do it. But you know what better way to live life than to see your children praising God and worshiping the God of heaven and not living their life fruitlessly.
You know, that's got to be a huge blessing. I don't have any children, and I'm probably not going to have children. And like I accepted that, and I understand that God's got a different plan for my life.
It's definitely for the brave. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that could be a big chicken. No, I couldn't find the right woman in my life to have a family with, and I was pursuing my own stuff for a long time, and you know what I mean. It's just one of those things where. I came to the realization that it wasn't a part of God's plan. I mean, God. I mean, like I'm not ruling it out. God, don't get me wrong. I don't make an idiot out of me like you did with Abraham. But
hey, you're better off not marrying the wrong person. And of course, marriage is not just a matter of marrying the right person. It's a matter of being the right person.
Right.
I believe behavior enters. And commitment. Love is commitment. It's not a feeling. Mm-hmm. Feelings go up and down. Love is continuous. It's commitment. It's a decision. It's a value system. And
that's true. That's not just the love of a wife and husband,
right.
But that's including love of God, a love of a child, a love of that.
Absolutely.
I mean, you're naturally drawn to your children. I understand that, but I mean, there's a lot of people who don't love their kids.
I've been married for 43 years, and love is what has kept me and my wife together. We're far from perfect. She's pretty close to it. but I am way
She
off.
must be watching.
She could be watching, yeah. Maybe she's in the audience. And I'll win points, but that's not the purpose. But the only way we've stayed together is by forgiveness and by talking things out and real love, the value. I value her. In fact, I thought this morning as I woke up and she was next to me, I thought to myself, I am so in love with you. I really love that woman. She is really a neat person. And I can't picture myself without her. After 43 years, I've been married to her longer than I haven't been married to her.
Yeah.
You know, and the biggest part of our life. And I cannot, again, exclude God from that picture because the Lord, the Bible, while that's necessary to govern a country and a world, it is absolutely imperative to govern a home. You can't do that without, God is the author of the family.
Yeah.
And it was the first institution he set up on earth. And we have just messed it up because we're not following his word. Well, you follow the word. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet. I quote the King James Version a lot. But your word, thy word, is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my pathway. Those are true words. And the word of God never goes away void. It's always on point. It's always right. It's always proven to be true.
Right.
You know, people have tried to prove the Bible wrong, and then later on they find, sometimes through science. Mm-hmm. But science and the Bible are so copacetic. And what happens is they end up changing the science because they find out it jives more with the Bible.
Yeah. In fact, I study physics as a hobby. And the more that I study physics, the more that I can see God in the design of the universe.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, it's like this would, especially those of you who actually study physics, you'll realize that this seems like it would be something that would be impossible to happen by itself.
Right.
It's like,
right.
How did that happen? The
right.
whole, we get life from non-life. That can only be from a creator. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's...
Well, you throw statistics into that, or even like thermodynamics. The second law of thermodynamics is the law of entropy. And things that are a steady rate of decay. And we know that's just absolutely right. But throw in statistics. Mm-hmm. The idea that... what would the statistics be if you took a box and threw some sand in it, shook it up, and opened it up, that you would find a perfectly formed Swiss watch?
Nearly impossible.
Nearly impossible. Well, that's like saying the same about the creation of man and all of the world and all that's in it.
Yeah, even in the same logic, you take the Swiss watch apart, all the pieces apart, put it back in the box, and then shake it up.
Yeah.
Forever, and it's never going to get back together.
Right.
Yeah. Even if all the pieces are already together.
Yeah. Imagine it keeping perfect time after that.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be impossible, right?
Right. It
Landing right on time and keeping perfect time. So that would be impossible. Well, with men, these things are impossible.
Yes.
But with God, all things are possible.
Right.
He defies the laws of everything, but he is the law of everything.
Right. And it is one of those things that it almost sounds childlike to say. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But that's why he says, "Come to me like children."
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Because
truly.
Yeah. Because if you come to Jesus with the heart and the mindset of a child when it comes to Jesus, then the things that seem impossible go away, and it makes sense.
Right.
Because otherwise you're that whole I'm resistant. I have my own ideas of things, and
right.
You know what I mean. And
right.
because of what you want things to believe and what the truth is don't sync. You know what I mean? You become resistant. But if you drop all your preconceptions and come to Jesus with an open mind and open heart, you're going to see the beauty of Christ.
Yeah, some people say, show me and I'll believe, and God says, believe and I'll show you. And we were talking about the creation of things. You know, in reality, when you look at man and you look at all the creatures around us and all the universe, for that matter, all these protons and neutrons and electrons, and what keeps all that together? I mean, what keeps it? What binds that? And they don't understand that concept. They're still looking to figure out how that is bound together and stays together in forms like a person. But the answer is right there in the Bible. In 1 Corinthians, I think it was, Paul said, in him are all things, and by him all things consist. That means the word in Greek there means glued together. All things are glued together. He holds it together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And without him was not anything made that was made. So,
you know, I mean, obviously there is probably some advanced science, you know what I mean, to explain everything. But it's still, when we get to that point of the advanced science, there'll probably be no defying an actual creator.
absolutely.
Because we'll see that to get to that point, it would had to have been made so that it can be remade. You know?
Yeah, every journalist, every scientist that has set out to disprove the existence of God, I believe in their own hearts have found God to be there. Like Josh McDowell was one, wrote The Case for Christ. And then there was C.S. Lewis, who asked himself all those questions and came to the conclusion there is a God and he's very real. And I think a lot of people go through that experience trying to, okay, if this is real, you know, this or that, and they find Christ along the way.
Yeah.
Because he reveals himself to you. If you're honestly searching, he will reveal himself. He doesn't hide himself in the universe. Day into day, utter speech, night into night, utters knowledge. There is no language or barrier. There's nothing where that cannot be understood that God is real and exists and he loves us. That's the part that's so hard for me to believe sometimes. It's hard to, but I have to believe it because that's my hope. That he loves me despite what I am, despite my breaking his laws, that he cares about me and loves me no matter what I am.
Yeah. And, you know, for those of us who feel like God doesn't love us, that means that's really our problem, not God's problem. Just so we're clear. It's like, you know, I've wrestled with that in the past, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's like, you know, it's like, oh, well, do you actually love me? It's like, well, of course.
That's my singular wrestling right there.
Right.
I wrestle with that continuously because I was a very performance-based kid and raised that way. You know, if I didn't do well, I didn't feel loved. But, you know, God loves us no matter what we are, no matter where we're at. And he wants us to know that he loves us.
Yeah, the way I reconcile that in my mind is that the times when I'm feeling like questioning God's love for me is he's trying to teach me something, and that's why it's so painful and so hard. You know, because there's something I need to learn, or some character I need to build, or some endurance I need to establish, or, you know what I mean? Because, you know, it's like I look back on my life. You know, when you get over 50, you're able to do that. I look back on my life, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, you know what? It seems as though not only was I uniquely made at birth, but my life pattern, even the times I've strayed, it's like, okay, well, then how could that be? No, it's like I can look back and I say, okay, this right here was a lesson that I needed to learn. It's like, you know, I mean, you know, I drive people nuts sometimes because the way I see God as everything is God's will. Like I actually tell people like it's impossible to exist outside of God's will. And they're like, oh no, there's this and there's that and there's like, you know what I mean? And but I'm like, but God, you know, knew that you were going to do all these things
Exactly.
before you did them.
Yeah.
And all the good and all the bad are who you are now. Mm-hmm. And God's using you now.
Yeah.
So how could, God uses people that are straight evil. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
God uses them.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's really, a lot of people just don't want to believe that, God can, let bad things happen. But if we were all perfect, we wouldn't need God.
Exactly. It was funny, but when you called me to interview on this show, I was like to my wife, why would they want to interview me? I'm just an ordinary guy who makes a lot of mistakes, and she says to me, well, that's probably why they want to interview you.
Well, I mean, I look at it this way, where the people that come on the show, God sends me one way or another. You know what I mean? If the plan changes and somebody else is sent, for instance, Pastor Franklin's son was our guest just a second ago.
Right.
And Pastor Franklin ended up getting laryngitis to have his son come on. But his son had some really impactful things to say, and he probably had a different perspective of everything that we talked about than his father would have. So in my mind, this is the guest God actually wanted us to have.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And so that's why it worked out that way.
This brings up an interesting thought, how God works through our lives. Mm-hmm. A lot of times we have this idea, these plans, these directions we're headed in, and those things get messed up, and we get frustrated as a result of those things getting discombobulated and not exactly like we thought or planned them to be. But if we will stop and examine that and think about how God is involved in every aspect of our life, He's there through even the little things. There's a reason He intervenes sometimes. Maybe we don't even know why. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, you were late to work today, but did you realize there was a huge accident 5 minutes in front of where you passed through? And or maybe you got ahead, you got to work early, and there was a reason. Just little things like that, and we don't see the dangers. We're like the hamster in a cage, and the cat is lurking outside of the cage, thinking, a nice morsel of meal, and the hamster wants out of the cage, but he doesn't see the danger.
Right.
And we think of God as a cage. The bars aren't there to keep us from having fun and being free. They're there to keep the danger out.
Oh, the truth is there are no bars.
Exactly.
We are ridiculously in charge of our own fate.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But he knew what we were going to choose before we did.
I only say bars in the sense of God's commands.
Right.
We look at them as bars sometimes. Why would I want to be a Christian? Because you guys have all these things you have to do or don't have to do or can't do.
Actually,
and I'm thinking,
the way I think about
that's not the way it is.
Yeah, that's not it at all. In fact, one of the things that I say a lot that again, radical Christianity, I ruffle feathers on all sides.
I love it.
I say that we should not worry about the sin. We should focus on Jesus and let Jesus work in our lives, and the sin will resolve itself. Amen. And the truth of the matter is, no matter what we think we can control, if we're controlling the sin, then we're just going to be self-righteous. No. We're just going to be pious.
Right.
You know what I mean? And the truth of the matter is, God will use sin in our lives to do great things. You know what I mean? Look at David.
It is God who works in you both to will and to do His good pleasure.
Look at David, King David.
Yeah.
His biggest sin in the Bible is his relationship with Bathsheba, right? Killing her husband.
Murder of Uriah.
That's Solomon's mother.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
God turned it into a victory. And even in spite of that, calls David a man after his own heart.
Yes.
In spite of that.
And David was...
probably not like anybody ever since.
Mm-mm. And the truth of the matter is, it's not about what David did. It's about how much he loved and pursued God.
Yes.
And I mean, I would say that in modern times, the perception of sin is even a little different. Like what is sinful is probably different from David's time. You know what I mean? The perception of what is sinful, what you could do that was against God, and what you couldn't do that was against God. I mean, I think that we are a little bit more strict now because of not just our internal morality, but because of social norms and opinions and because it's just like politics, people will try to vote a certain way to force other people to do what they want. You know what I mean?
Right.
And back in those times, it wasn't quite like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's just perception. But
you're right.
I again, a radical. I tend to think as purity as I can on God as much as I can. You know what I mean? And I don't think I know better than anybody else. I just know what God has trained me to know.
There you go. It's like the woman at the well in the story in John. She said, "I don't know anything else." And she didn't have time to be trained about anything else. Mm-hmm. But when Jesus had told her entire life, she was convinced that he was the Christ, and that transformed her. And she didn't have time to be trained as a discipler. She didn't have time to be, groomed morally or any other thing. She went into the city immediately and began to tell everybody, "Come see a man that's told me everything I've ever done. Isn't this Jesus? Isn't this the Christ?" Mm-hmm. And so I don't know what else is about him. I just know this about him,
right?
That he told me everything I've ever done.
Right. I mean, that is, I am often jealous of those who were able to walk with and talk with Christ.
Sure. Because
the purity of knowledge that would have been the one-on-one with Christ would have been unprecedented. Mm-hmm. I think about that, and it's like we have 2,000 years separating us from those days. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's a lot of time.
It is.
We have, thank God for the Bible, that we have at least a foundation of understanding. But look at all the different doctrines. We have so many different people that look at the Bible so many different ways. You know what I mean? And although the one thing that seems to be consistent is the core truth, the core gospel, mm-hmm. and that is Jesus Christ came here to die for our sins, mm-hmm. and lives still to this day because he rose from the dead.
Right. Yeah, thinking about what you said there, the people that had Jesus in their day, right there in front of them, and yet they were so faithless at times. and like Thomas, he said, he says, unless I, stick my hand in the wounds in his hands and thrust my hand into his side, I'm not going to believe. Mm-hmm. And Jesus shows up and asks him that very question. Go ahead, thrust your hand in my side. See the wounds in my hands. Be not faithless, but believing.
It'd be hard to not believe after that.
Exactly.
Especially when you saw him die.
Yeah. And then he says, blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. And that's us today. Mm-hmm. We have not seen with our own eye the body of Jesus. Someday we will. Mm-hmm. Someday he's going to appear in the clouds, and every eye will see him, and they will look on him whom they pierced. And, a lot of fearful things are going to follow that, mm-hmm. for people who don't know the Lord. But I'm looking forward to seeing him.
I don't know if it's going to be bad for people who don't know the Lord, because I think that the power of God and Christ is strong enough to where those who aren't educated, don't have a personal relationship with him, right. will still know what they're seeing.
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
And their knees will still bow. Their tongue will still confess that Jesus Christ is Lord.
Yeah, the Lord is, every knee will bow. Every tongue will confess. I mean, that's an absolute right there in Philippians.
Right.
That Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of God the Father. And those that confess that, if you confess that with your mouth, you believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you will be saved.
Yeah, and the last will be first, and the first will be last.
Yeah.
So and people like when I say that again, this is one of those things I ruffle feathers with. I'm like, like think about this. We're sitting, waiting in line to get in heaven. Those of us who have been saved for a long time, we're all like at the back of the line.
Yeah.
Right. And then
Where's my spot?
And there's going to be that guy who's facing Jesus to be judged, and he maybe just discovered Jesus at that moment, and he's going to be like, "Oh, you're Jesus. My whole life I had no idea that. I mean, I
and that's not going to matter.
It's not going to matter.
No.
And he's going to be like, "Oh, I see that you love me now, and that
Yeah.
you believe me now." You know
Right.
what I mean? And then there's going to be those who, it says right in the Bible that he say, "I never knew you." You know what I mean?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then because they're going to be sitting there in Jesus' face, and they're going to be not connecting.
Yeah.
They'll see him. They'll believe the awareness, but they won't have that thing inside.
Yeah, and a lot of them were pretenders in that thought right there. Have we not cast out devils in your name? Have we not done many marvelous works?
I see them as akin to the nature of Lucifer, what got him cast out of heaven.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, and a third part of the angels with him. So apparently, some of the angels went along with the attempted coup.
Well, they were convinced and decided to feel that way.
Right.
And then, again, this gets me in trouble. I'm like, well, it's like God built Lucifer.
Right.
You know what I memean?
He did.
So
And he knew what the result would be.
Right.
He wasn't blindsided by this guy.
And he put the tree of good and good and
Knowledge
evil,
of good and evil,
knowledge
yeah.
good and evil in the garden.
Exactly.
If he didn't anticipate that being part of the future, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, why would he even think of doing it?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So again, these are things that irritate everybody. So it's like,
Yeah, they can't quite figure out why would God do it then, but you know what?
I think it's real obvious
Yeah, it is.
to establish a need for him.
To show his power and might, and that he is not afraid of anything, that he's in control of everything. He can do what he will, what he wishes. And when we pray for his will to be done on earth as it is in heaven, I mean, it's absolute in heaven. And we would pray for that on earth because the earth would be better off with that.
Well, I think, like we talked about earlier, if we were all perfect, we wouldn't feel a need for God.
Right.
So, I mean, instead of creating a race of Lucifers, you know what I mean? He created a race of free thinkers and established a way for them to need God, a way for them to like, okay, yeah. And most people come to Jesus through, trials, transition, or trauma, right?
Right.
And
Well, that's a good alliteration right there. Trials. You can say that again?
trials, transition, and trauma. I can't take credit for that. I actually got that from my pastor.
That's pretty cool.
But that's one of those things that like most people. They get on their knees because of that.
Right.
They have to be broken down because they have to realize that God's way is better than their way.
Right.
You know what I mean? You don't just like go, oh, la, la, great. You know what I mean? It's like usually when you really come to that position, you're broken down over something. You know what I mean?
That's true.
I've
got a little alliteration that I've used before. I put this together for a seminar that I did with on climbing. I'm a climber. I've climbed every major climb in Yosemite. And,
well, it's good that it's in your district then.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. But disappointments, detours, dilemmas, dead ends, dry holes, and drama. You could go on and on and on with that. But those are the kind of things that shape our world a little bit. They cause us to stop and think, and to face those things head on and conquer them is the human experience.
And I obviously, I feel as though those things help us to grow, help us to mature, help us to have an appreciation and a better understanding of who God is and who we are to Him. So,
most assuredly. Yeah. And our hope is that everyone will find that path, because He says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. He'll lighten your load. He gives you joy, a joy that's beyond circumstance. We could be in the worst possible circumstance, but still have joy. And the joy of the Lord is our strength.
Right. We are so out of time. We went way, way over. But,
that's cool.
Yeah, it's totally cool.
We're having fun with it.
It'll all be on the internet. I want to thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
I'm so glad that
you're
God
my
put
kind of guy there. I'm glad we got acquainted.
Yeah, I'm glad God put us together, and we're definitely going to have you back on the show. It would be awesome, and this just popped into my head, so I'm going to say it's spirit-led. So you guys can try hold me to this someday. You know what? When it's really good weather, we should make a trip in Yosemite, and
that would be fun,
and have a nice little walk and talk and chat and
that would be fun.
Enjoy God's nature and dig into some deep talk.
There you go.
I think that would be awesome.
I like it. Yeah. That's the two go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. It's one of the reasons I love Yosemite. It's one of my favorite places on earth.
It's one of the most beautiful places on earth.
It is. And you really you experience it in a different way when you're 3,000-4,000 feet above the threshold, and it just it makes you know you're alive. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it's one of the things I love about Fresno is that we are right in the middle of California. We get the ocean a couple hours away. We got the Yosemite is right up the mountain. We have
premium.
Yeah, I mean, everything is within driving distance, and but the beauty and power of the ocean, and it's like you can't sit there and watch ocean waves and not see God in it. It's ridiculous.
Exactly.
And you can't go up to Yosemite and look at El Capitan and look at Half Dome and look at all this stuff and be like, oh. And if you don't see God in that, you're blind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're just, you need an eye transplant.
Exactly. You know what? We have a saying on here, it's like, you're definitely rad for Christ. You're definitely fired up for Jesus. And we love to see that here.
Hey, man. I appreciate it.
God bless you, David.
You too.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so grateful that you joined us today. I hope that you got some wonderful stuff out of this episode. I know that I did. These guests were terrific. They had some really impactful, really hard-hitting, some serious messaging. Glory to God, right? Okay, so I am grateful for your joining us. I'm grateful for the guests, and I want to reach out to that person right there who is feeling Jesus on their mind, on their heart. I would like you to consider taking that step of reaching out to Jesus. Maybe you're wondering if it's something that you should do. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're confused. Maybe something somebody said really kind of hit home with you. I would just like to push you over the line if I can, Accepting Jesus into your heart is not a bad thing. In fact, it'll probably be the best decision you've ever made in your entire life. And trust me, there's almost no way to regret it. If you are wondering how to do it, it's super easy. You just talk to Jesus. You just say something along these lines like, Jesus, I need you. The way that I'm approaching life is not getting me the satisfaction and joy I need. I would like you to come into my heart. Let me change my ways and pick up the way that you want me to be. Turn me into the man or woman, into the person that you have designed me to be. And if you say something like that, you know what I mean? Jesus is going to come in. And, you may not feel an immediate difference, but I'll tell you, you might. You may be overwhelmed, you may be flooded, it might be a huge release, I have no way of telling what you're going to feel, but I can tell you that it's not something that you'll ever regret in your entire life. And I would like to welcome you to the family of God. And one thing you could do for me is you can go to radforchrist.com, and on the website there's a Got Saved form. You could just fill out that form and let me know that you got saved watching this show, either on a rerun or on the broadcast or whatever. And I would be more than happy to send you a Bible and a little gift to show you that we're grateful for you reaching out to us, and that we want you to have a Bible and be welcomed into the family of God. Also on our website, you can find a form there for prayer requests. And if you have a question, you can ask a question, whether that question is about the Bible or about the show or about one of our guests or a math question. We will do our best to try and answer the question for you. We are here to serve. And this is the most important part right here. And that is Jesus Christ loves you. And so do I. Thank you so much for watching Radical Christianity. We will see you next week.
And I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up, no, not me. Even if nobody else believes, I'm not going down that easily. So don't give up on me.
It's a mystery.